An unknown flying object crash lands at a New Mexico ranch in July of 1947. The incident is reported to the authorities, and subsequently, the Roswell Army Airfield promptly dispatches a unit to recover the debris from the crash site. Multiple bodies of deceased aliens are found, and their recovery process is witnessed by many residents in the area. Incredibly, by sheer luck or miracle, one of the alien beings inside the craft is found alive and uninjured. The alien is apprehended on site and is then taken to a CIA facility. The alien is interrogated for a month and a half. The interrogation is spearheaded by the CIA, but an Army Air Force nurse, Matilda McElroy, is the one to earn the trust of the alien and the only person the being will communicate with. In the following weeks, Nurse McElroy conducts several interviews with the alien being. In those interviews, she is told of the truth about the Earth, humanity, and a shocking revelation of our universe. We're going to skip the finer details of the crash since by now it's been told a dozen times or more, and most of you should be familiar with the incident that started the entire Roswell UFO saga. That being said, it should be noted that the Public Information Officer at the 509th Bomb Group based in Roswell, New Mexico, First Lieutenant Walter Holt, was ordered by the base commander, Colonel Blanchard, to draft a press release to the public announcing that the United States Army Air Force had recovered a crashed flying disc from a nearby ranch. Oddly enough, the US Army Air Force retracted the claim later the same day, saying instead that a weather balloon had been recovered. Holt later became the target for criticism and ridicule in the nation's press for putting out the original press release. When interviewed about the incident decades later, he claimed to have played only a minor role, but expressed his belief that there was no chance senior officers who handled the recovered materials, including Base Commander Blanchard, mistook a weather balloon for a flying saucer. After his death, in a video recording made in the year 2000, he claimed to have had a greater involvement in the cover-up, stating seeing alien corpses and a craft at a base hangar and handling the strange crash debris. Walter Holt died at the age of 83. That makes him 78 in the year 2000. He was at a period in his life when he would have known he was at the end of it. Did the knowledge of having little to lose at that point make him tell the truth? The reality is that we'll never know. But let's get back to the aliens. They were approximately 3 to 4 feet tall, with 6 fingers and no apparent thumb on their hands. They had large but finely featured faces with almond-shaped eyes. They looked somewhat similar to the gray aliens we're also familiar with from the films and comic books post the Roswell incident. It is said that the sole surviving alien was in a state of shock and weakened from the crash landing. In part due to his condition, it wasn't able to communicate nor resist while it was being transported to a secret CIA facility. After the alien was placed in confinement, it refused to eat anything and it seemed to have lost all hope for life. It was akin to a human being suffering from a severe depression. The CIA agents had implemented many different tactics of interrogation, but the alien had refused all attempts at communication. They couldn't even get the alien to acknowledge their presence. While the attempts to communicate with the alien was ongoing, the person in charge of looking after the physical health of the alien was the Army Air Force nurse Matilda McElroy, who was also present at the crash site as the debris were being collected. Whether out of pity or pure kindness, Matilda treated the alien with warmth and respect. She was likely more inclined to do so since the interrogation tactics used by the military and the CIA were harsh and impolite. The only person who treated the alien as a sentient being was Nurse Matilda. After some time had passed, the alien seemed to show emotional reaction towards Matilda. It seemed to finally break out of his shell, but only when Matilda was around and her alone. Note that the alien will be called by the name Errol from here on. Errol tells Matilda her name in their later meeting, but will use the name Errol from here on regardless. Also, Errol will be referred as a she and not it. This is so because Matilda felt as though Errol displayed a rather strong feminine presence and demeanor. In terms of physiology, the being was asexual, but we're basing everything on Matilda's testimony. Thus, Errol would be referred as a female from this point of our presentation. Matilda was rather pessimistic from the standpoint of communication, since neither of them could speak each other's language. But what Matilda didn't know was that Errol didn't communicate in spoken language. Her mother tongue per se is telepathic, and she doesn't require the other party to be a telepath for her to have a two-way conversation. According to Matilda's statement in an interview conducted much later in life, the moment Errol opened up to her and began communicating, she could perceive images, emotions, and impressions, but it was difficult for Matilda to express them verbally. It was only after Errol learned the English language that she was able to focus her thoughts more precisely using symbols and meanings of words Matilda could understand. Learning the English language was done as a favor to Matilda. It was more for Matilda's own benefit than Errol's. Matilda became more comfortable with telepathic communication after spending more time with Errol. She had become more adept at understanding Errol's thoughts as though they were her own. Somehow, Errol's thoughts became her thoughts, her emotions were Matilda's emotions. Having said that, this was limited by Errol's willingness and intention to share her own personal universe with Matilda. Errol is able to be selective about what communication Matilda was allowed to receive from her. Likewise, her experience, training, education, relationships, and purposes are uniquely her own. Upon realizing that Matilda was the only person Errol was willing to communicate with, agents from multiple government agencies, along with the military, had decided to have Matilda conduct an official interview with the alien being. The interview room was prepared with a camera and a microphone set up to record all the happenings inside the room. Matilda couldn't understand the microphone installation since they wouldn't be communicating verbally, but nonetheless it was there. Observing the room from the outside were many professionals from many different fields. The first ever interview of an alien being was about to be realized, and the following transcript is from the said interview, conducted by Master Sergeant Matilda McElroy, now promoted to have the proper clearance level for the interview. Are you injured? No. What medical assistance do you require? None. Do you need food or water or other sustenance? No. Do you have any special environmental needs such as air temperature, atmospheric chemical content, air pressure, or waste elimination? No, I am not a biological being. Does your body or spacecraft carry any germs or contamination that may be harmful to humans or other Earth life forms? No germs in space. Does your government know you're here? Not at this time. Are others of your kind going to come looking for you? Yes. What is the weapon capability of your people? Very destructive. Matilda noted that she did not understand the exact nature of the kind of arms or weapons that they might have, but she did not feel any malevolent intention in Errol's reply, just a statement of fact. Why did your spacecraft crash? It was struck by an electrical discharge from the atmosphere, which caused us to lose control. Why was your spacecraft in this area? Investigation of burning clouds, radiation, explosions. Allow me to interject here. This was after the Manhattan Project has successfully produced the first atomic bomb. Not to mention, it had been 2 years since the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. Some might dismiss our technological achievement up to that point as something insignificant to a much more advanced alien civilization, but I will counter that by saying that any civilization capable of harnessing nuclear energy could potentially become dangerous to maybe not the advanced aliens themselves, but to the peace and order of the universe as a whole. We study ants and ant colonies because, for one, even insects can teach us something. 2, because any unknown is worth studying. And 3, often there are pest problems that we must deal with. I don't think it's a stretch to think that an advanced alien civilization might take interest in our yet limited but evolving achievements. Let's continue with the interview, but keep in mind that the transcript will be summarized from this point on. According to Errol, they pilot their crafts using their minds. As mentioned earlier, Errol's people communicate using telepathy, so there's likely a correlation in those two things. That said, they do have a written language. Errol's homeworld seemed to be called the Domain. Matilda, not being an astronomer, she was unable to understand Errol's explanation in terms of stars, galaxies, constellation, and directions in space. However, she did come away with the notion that Errol wasn't trying to pinpoint to a planet, but rather she was trying to tell Matilda that an enormous number of galaxies belonged to her people. They were all her home. Errol mentioned that her government had minimal interest on planet Earth. They had no plans to send their representatives, and their sole mission for the planet was to observe it periodically. As for the reason for the observation, Errol stated they wanted to preserve and protect the property of the Domain. Errol described the Earth as being poor, small, and that its inhabitants were destroying the planet. They had visited Earth long before humans came to existence, thus to them, we were likely no more than a blip in time. When describing her own planet, Errol used the words civilization, culture, history, wealth, order, power, knowledge, and wisdom. As for the state of development of their civilization, Errol stated they've been around for trillions of years, which Matilda later explained that it meant more along the line of the word infinite. Errol seemed to suggest that our people were the most advanced in all of the universe. The words plan, schedule, progress, win, high goals, and ideas were used to express her thoughts to Matilda. The word God didn't register with Errol. Her entire civilization were likely atheists, and that was obvious in a way since one could argue that her people boasted powers that rivaled God. Matilda felt as though Errol's people thought very highly of themselves and are very prideful. Errol described their society as order, power, future always, control, and grow. Matilda felt the intensity in Errol's emotion when describing her society. She said it filled her with emotion that gave her a feeling of jubilation, but it also made her very nervous. Lastly, Errol stated that the universe is filled with other intelligent life forms. She also emphasized that her civilization was the greatest and highest of all. That concluded the first interview with Errol. Those in charge were initially ecstatic of the initial communication, but it didn't last as soon they realized Matilda was unable to understand nor convey the conversation with Errol with clarity and preciseness. It should be noted that this was before Errol had learned the English language. At that point in time, Matilda was still communicating with Errol through images and emotions. Later on the same day, they attempted to communicate with Errol again, but this time with others present in the room. Errol refused the interview. Multiple attempts with several other experts had also failed. They conducted the official second interview on the next day. Matilda was told to ask only one question. She was to ask Errol why she stopped communicating. Errol stated that she felt the fear and distrust from the others. Do not misunderstand. Errol did not have even a tiny bit of fear of humans. As Matilda opined, she was curious and excited to learn anything from Errol, but as far as for those in charge, she neither trusted or had confidence in them whatsoever. Errol must have felt the same way, and thus the refusal to communicate while anyone other than Matilda was present in the room. The whole situation left those in charge frustrated and wanting better results. Matilda felt the pressure to find more efficient ways to communicate with Errol. The magnitude of her mission was finally starting to get to her. A new room had been constructed for the third interview. A one-way glass had been installed through which the interview could be observed from an adjoining room without intruding on the alien. When Matilda entered the room, she felt a very genuine sense of recognition, relief, and a warm feeling coming from Errol. Matilda was very surprised that she shared the same emotions towards Errol, in spite of them having spent so little time together and not to mention with so many prying eyes surrounding them. While going through the questions for the third interview, it was obvious to Matilda that the questionnaire was designed in a way so as to those in charge could learn to communicate with the alien themselves without having to go through Matilda. In any event, the following is the summarized transcript of the third interview. Errol stated that she couldn't read or write in English, although as a pilot, engineer, and as an officer, she could understand numbers and mathematics. Errol had no means to write or draw symbols to help the humans translate her thoughts. Matilda recalls in her later interview that it was more of a refusal than an inability in terms of communicating with symbols and drawings. She compared that to a soldier being captured by enemy forces and refusing to give any intel under pressure to do so. She was only able and willing to reveal non-confidential or personal information. When asked to show the star of her home planet on a map of stars, Errol answered that her home planet didn't exist on any star map found on Earth, that it was too far away. Matilda, though, could sense that even if Errol could, she was clearly unwilling to reveal the location of her home planet. Errol wasn't sure how long it would take for her people to locate her, but in terms of the practical travel time from her home to planet Earth, it apparently took minutes or hours. Errol also made it abundantly clear that she can tell if someone means harm to her. She essentially can read minds, she can see images in our brains and perceive emotions that we feel. As for why she categorizes herself as a feminine, even though she's not exactly a biological being, she stated, "I am a creator, mother, source." That's how the third interview concluded. It only took minutes to finish, and it yielded very little results for those in charge. Matilda sensed that Errol could be in serious trouble if she continued to be uncooperative. Errol obviously understood her predicament, but she was still unwilling to cooperate with those who harbored ill intentions. The people in charge were very upset at the result provided by Matilda. They spent hours discussing their options, then came to an obvious conclusion to allow Matilda to continue with the interviews. At a later hour on the same day, they sent Matilda back into the interview room with a single question for Errol. Matilda questioned, "What assurance or proof do you require from us that will make you feel safe enough to answer our questions?" "Only she speaks, only she hears, only she questions, no others, must learn, know, understand." When Matilda returned with the answer, the people in charge were not only unhappy with the cryptic message, but they were skeptical of Matilda's honesty. She explained to them that she couldn't fully comprehend Errol's messages since she didn't have a full grasp of the telepathic language. However, her reasoning seemed to make everyone argue even more. Matilda was sure she would be relieved of her duties and felt like giving up on the mission. Luckily, however, a language specialist named John Newell explained the situation more clearly to everyone in the room. He first let everyone know that Matilda was the only person Errol would even consider communicating with. He made that very clear. Second, in order for any clear, comprehensive communication to happen, both parties need to understand and communicate through a common language. Therefore, he suggested that there were only two choices. Matilda had to learn to speak the language of the alien, or the alien had to learn to speak English. Factually, only one choice was possible. That Matilda persuade Errol to learn English, and that she teach it to her with the guidance of the language specialist. No one had any objection to trying this approach, as there was no other suggestion. Matilda suggested to Earl the solution, and Earl agreed, but without any commitment to answer questions. Several children's books were used to read aloud while pointing to the texts. Most of them were of wholesome subjects, and Earl seemed to enjoy them. More advanced methods of learning were proceeded to be used, and Errol had no trouble digesting through the new information. Errol studied for 14 hours a day for 3 days straight, and the only person taking breaks for meals and such was Matilda. Eventually, reading or teaching Errol became pointless, as she would memorize every lesson prior and even future curriculum. Errol didn't require breaks, and she continued the study on her own. Over the next 6 days, books were brought in from libraries all over the country. It wasn't more than a few days before she had read through several hundreds of them. During those days, Matilda and Errol had only a handful of communication. They communicated only when Errol wanted more context or clarification on certain topics. Interestingly, Errol told Matilda that her favorite books are Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Don Quixote, and 1001 Nights. She said the authors of those stories showed that it is more important to have great spirit and imagination than great skill or power. By the 15th day in captivity, Errol could communicate fluently and effortlessly in English. Telepathically, of course. She also possessed so much technical knowledge with all the reading she's done that by then, Errol had become the teacher and Matilda the student. It was of no surprise as Errol possessed photographic memory and as well as the concentration level humans can only dream of. Those in charge grew impatient as the days passed, but Errol was still unwilling to answer any questions. On the afternoon of the 16th day, Matilda was about to hand Errol a new book when she spoke to her mind with the message, "I am ready to speak now." The official fourth interview was about to begin, in which Errol would finally reveal the truth about planet Earth, humanity, and a shocking revelation of our universe. The fourth interview will be revealed on the next episode, as there is so much information to go through and it would be too convoluted to cram everything into a single video. I expect we'll see 2 to 3 additional videos to finish this story, but bear with me as things get far more interesting as the story progresses. As a final note, I will add that this video is based purely on the hearsay of Master Sergeant Matilda McElroy. All the information comes from the book Alien Interview, which was authored by Lawrence Spencer. The book is essentially the interview transcripts that were kept secret for 60 years by Mrs. McElroy, under the threat of death, she claims. She sent the transcripts to Lawrence Spencer a few months before her passing. Subsequently, it was published in literature under non-fiction category. Lawrence went against the advice of Mrs. McElroy, who felt it'd be safer both for her and Lawrence to publish the book as a work of fiction. Regardless of my personal feelings on the subject, it is important to mention that there is no scientific or physical evidence to substantiate the claims of Master Sergeant McElroy, other than her words and the transcripts themselves. So take the story as you will, as entertainment, as something more, or as pure fiction. That is for you to decide. Thanks for watching, I'll see you on the next episode, bye for now.